Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Well, there are very few moments in our liturgy or in any of the chantings we have for our ceremonies in which we are called upon to examine ourselves. The only place where I can think of it, I mean, certainly Dogen Zenji in Shobogenzo says this regularly, you know, take this up with yourself and examine it and so forth, and it's a little bit different from what we have in our chanting. And we might have it to some degree in some of our sutras, morning sutras, where we are told, don't waste time in our lives, look into this teaching and don't waste your time by night or day. But this particular moment happens in our meal sutra. So the ending part of our meal sutra, innumerable labors gave us this food, we should know how it comes to us. Second, as we receive this offering, we should consider whether our virtue and practice deserve it. Third, as we desire the natural order of mind to be free from clinging, we must be free from greed. Fourth, to support our lives, we take this food. Fifth, to attain our way, we take this food. So this second part has always interested me, and I think it's the occasion for many people coming very deeply into an experience of the Dharma via this one statement. Second, we should consider whether our virtue and practice, as we receive this food, we should consider whether our virtue and practice deserve it. And in the translation, the new translation by Sotoshu, we reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. We reflect on our virtue and practice and whether we are worthy of this offering. We regard greed as the obstacle to freedom of mind. We regard this meal as medicine to sustain our life. For the sake of enlightenment, we now receive this food. So the second one, you know, the translation is a little bit different here, but at the same time, we are asked to consider, are we worthy of this offering? And it's the only place, as I say, that I know where we are really asked to look into ourselves. Particularly in our society that we have come through, our practice in America is deeply influenced by the 60s, where we disregarded guilt, we disregarded shame of any kind, and said, sorry, we're just not going to do those any longer. And so any notion of self-examination seemed to disappear from our discourse, our natural societal discourse. And so at the same time, without that, we don't have a deepening in practice without a really close examination of how we are, where we are in relationship to the virtues of practice and practice itself, how we are in practice. That's very important. And this is not just to do with the intake of food, because the Meal Sutra is not at all about food, actually. It is about the degree to which we can immerse ourselves in the Dharma. Food is just the Dharma, and there's nothing other than that. So when we speak about receiving this offering, it is the offering of the Buddha Dharma that is coming into us. All food is life, just the life of the Dharma. All life is the Buddha Dharma. So we take in this food, we take in the Buddha Dharma to be the Buddha Dharma, to realize the Buddha Dharma. And so we consider whether our virtue and practice deserve it. is our practice, is our virtue worthy of receiving the Dharma? Even though we already are the Dharma, but we are also receiving the Dharma. And are we able to live at the virtue and practice of awakening? If our virtue and practice are not where it needs to be receptive to awakening, how could we possibly hold it if it should come to us, if such a profound gift were given to us? How could we possibly hold such a thing? So this very simple statement is quite huge in our consideration of how we are. It is deeply important that we each examine ourselves and see where we are and see how we are doing, and be truly honest with that. I've said so many times that the second koan is something that we ought to study first before we study the mu koan, opening to emptiness. Because causality, the second koan is that we are subject to causality. And unless we understand that, then emptiness is disregarded, or we can easily abuse emptiness, or we can forget it, or we can be unable to live the virtues of the Buddha if we don't understand that. A little bit also like the story, that, or the saying, after enlightenment, then the laundry, meaning we have this profound awakening, but there is also just the laundry to be done, or cooking, or housework. There's nothing extraordinary about it. But I am inclined to think first the laundry, then enlightenment. That we should also think in that way too. That how we live our day and how we do our work is primary to the cultivation of virtue. And it has never been more urgently needed that we live in such a way that we exemplify the teachings of the Buddha. There's great suffering in our country right now. And commitment to practice, to lift ourselves, and to hold our culture in some semblance of balance and equilibrium is greatly and sorely needed right now. Because this is what we do. This is what we give to the world. We give our understanding of the Dharma. It is our gift to the world. And the Dharma continues to give its gift to us. It is deeply reciprocal. But if we don't consider whether our virtue and practice deserve it, then it's lost. I also have this, where did I have it? A little saying that I came across by Martin Buber. My friend Don Johnson's book on Martin Buber has been accepted for publication, so I've been in some discussion about Martin Buber with him, and it seems to me that a little bit this relates. I was trying to tie them together. We'll see if it can be managed. But Buber says, the Archimedean point by which I can move the world from within my circumstances is my own self-transformation. do it again because it's a lot to unpack. The Archimedean point by which I can move the world from within my circumstances is my own self-transformation. So we all remember, I assume he's referring to the Archimedean principle that the body that enters the ocean displaces the same amount of water as its weight. Is that correct, you scientists in the room? So if we,
No, isn't it that if I had a place to stand, I could move the world with a lever?
well, you
I
could
thought
say
that's-
that, but
I
that's
thought
not
that's what it
Archimedes'
was.
principle.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's the displacement of a body in liquid is Archimedes' principle, I believe. I don't know who did the levers, maybe Archimedes did the levers also. But, so as we immerse ourselves in the Dharma, the ocean of Dharma, then that same Dharma then washes over us in its equal state. And in so doing, by giving ourselves in that totality, that becomes my own self-transformation. So it's this equal giving and receiving that brief sentence says in the Meal Sutra. Consider whether my virtue and practice deserve it. So I give as best I can my 100%, totally relying in the Dharma, and consequently the Dharma gives and balances. And that is my self-transformation, my giving myself to the Dharma. That has a lot to unpack, that Buber statement, but I thought it was an interesting one in relationship to this consideration, although I'm sure one can consider it in many, many different ways. But, so I just urge us to practice deeply during these times. I mean, always practice deeply for one's whole life. But right now, the world needs good, strong, energetic, soulful, generous, giving practice without holding back at all. So maybe you have something to add to this or some thoughts.
I have the sense that you're somewhat describing gratitude.
Okay?
Do you think that's correct?
I do think it is correct. I'm just coming at it from a different way. That is complete giving, gratitude for our lives. Gratitude to have been born into this body and this opportunity. This is so rare. And so we express complete gratitude by embracing it in its totality.
Because it's never been clear to me how one develops the capacity of gratitude. But it sort of seems like it's just throwing oneself in even more completely.
Yes. No, I think that gratitude appears. I don't know that you stand up and you say, okay, I'm going to be grateful today. I don't think it's like that at all. It's in the doing of something that we discover gratitude within us. It's in bowing that we discover gratitude. It sweeps over us at some point. And it's in continuous practice that we begin to, that gratitude itself is nurtured in us without our even realizing that that is what is happening. So I honestly don't think it's one of those deals that you say, I'm going to show how grateful I am to it. That's kind of phony. You know, gratitude is something so deep underneath what we do. It is like the supporting life of our whole sustenance. And so, you know, especially in the Meal Sutra, we discover that innumerable labors gave us this food. We should know how it comes to us. We used to say 72 labors brought us this food. That is, every single thing had been identified that brought food to this very moment that I could place in this mouth. And, you know, if we think about it, you know, the seeds on the fields, and the farmer, and the pickers, and the truckers, and the people in the supermarket. And I mean, there's even so many more than that. And then getting the food to somebody cooking it and placing it on the table in such a way that it is appropriately displayed in its beauty so that we can put it down into our stomachs. I mean, it's an astounding continuity of life. It's just an astounding display of Dharma, that revolving movement of food and life. And I think that it takes a great deal of practice to realize how impossible it is for us to be ever grateful enough, because we just can't go around thinking about the truck drivers and all of these people, you know. We do it, and we express our gratitude then in every action of practice. So it is indeed what I am saying. I'm just coming at it from a different way. So. Yes, Del.
An observation, I guess. It's interesting. Will thought of gratitude. I went the opposite direction and then thought of guilt and confession and renunciation,
Mm-hmm.
which I think they're both part of
Yes.
the same thing.
I think you're correct. I mean, for instance, our practice is, even if you haven't taken monk's vows, you don't have to be a monk to come in and experience, for the time of practice here, a kind of renunciation. That is, everything is removed. You sit on the cushion and you hear there's nothing around you and there's nothing in front of you except that wall, a kind of renunciation of all of the effects of the display of culture that wash over us in the world. So for that time, that is what we are doing. And in the examination of ourselves, we should be able to understand guilt and shame. Not that we celebrate those in us, or that we emphasize it, or that we sink ourselves into those, but that they're important pointers, I think, in understanding how we can be better. And that if we've harmed somebody, we ought to know that we've harmed them, and we ought to feel at least some sense of guilt around that, or maybe we've just sort of shirked something, and we should feel, okay, maybe I need to make up for that. Not sinking into guilt or shame either, but by recognizing the value of those emotions and how they play in us. So I'm a bit old-fashioned in that I see those values. I think our society does not like them at all, but let's do that. I think that in our practice, that we need to hold them in balance at least. As I say, not sinking into them, but holding them as a value, as a point of being able to see ourselves in association with those activities that do function in us. So I think you're quite right. It is through those that we come to gratitude. It's by holding those in relationship that we do come to gratitude. So you're quite right. I mean, so, you know, for instance, if maybe I've hurt somebody or I've done something thoughtless to somebody, and I feel some sense of remorse about that, a gratitude for that person's life is awakened in me because of that. I realize the value of that person and how could I have done that? And I express gratitude for their beingness. So all of those are intertwined and maybe very complex in us, or maybe very simple, but indeed, they're an important function. So, you know, and almost anything can awaken gratitude. You know, the sound of that child, I can feel gratitude for my own parents through that child's voice, which just happened with me, just thinking, you know, I had a parent once when I sounded like that. And I have grandchildren who sound like that, and I'm grateful for their lives. And so it's endless. Gratitude is an endless way of life. And we've been given this incredible practice, and so it's so rare.